Hello and welcome to the first ever video on the Collected Conjuring channel. My name is John Kaz and I will be your host. I want to introduce to everyone a project that has been in my head for a really, really long time that I'm finally getting off the ground. Basically, when I first got back into Magic, it was right around the Return to Ravnica block. And I decided that I was going to take 4 draft sets of each of these limited environments labeled on these boxes here, and keeping 12 packs of each one of them sealed, and then eventually at some point I was going to gather some friends together and then eventually make a cube out of them. Now that the whole world has a whole bunch of free time, I figured that now would be a good time to maybe accelerate that a little bit and document the whole process in case there's anybody that's interested in it. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be ripping open these packs and then building 2 23-card limited decks out of each one of these pools, and then at some point just kind of merging them all together and then making a cube out of them. So we'll have, pretty representative decks of each one of these limited formats involved in the cube. The only thing that we're going to be careful not to do is we're not going to add any of the mana fixing at the beginning. That'll all get added at the end to make sure that it's balanced amongst the colors. And also, I'm recording this after doing a couple of the videos opening the packs and realized that if we were going to do this, we'd probably have about 35 copies of Traveler's Amulets, and I don't want a cube that has 35 copies of Traveler's Amulets. So that's where we're starting, with 2 23-card decks out of each pool, and then we're going to jam them together and build a cube and hopefully record some drafts with it at the end of the project. And also everything, this isn't set in stone. This is where we're starting. This is what makes sense to me at the beginning. As we go along, things may change. We might want to maybe just build pools that build the most powerful cube we can out of all the cards and not care about the different limited formats. In case we do decide to change our minds, I do have all of the pools saved to make sure that if we ever did want to go back and make any changes to how we did things, we can go ahead and do that. So starting with the normal 23-card decks, and then going from there. So the first set that we're going to do is going to be Guilds of Ravnica. I'm just going to put a link to this wiki page in the description of the video. I don't feel the need to go through and read all of this, but if you are interested in it, there is a whole bunch of stuff on this page. They have links to the Magic Story articles from Guilds of Ravnica. They have the different cycles and cards that were reprinted in Guilds of Ravnica. We're starting with here because the set's about to rotate out of standard in 2 months, so it's at its peak usefulness right now, and then after that it won't be quite as useful anymore. So I want to do these. We're going to start with Guilds, and then go on to Ravnica Allegiance, and then War of the Spark, and then M20 will be the first 4 videos that we do, and then we'll get those out before those rotate out of standard so that they're still fresh in everybody's minds. And then we'll probably finish those 4. Starting with Zendikar Rising, I think we're probably going to be keeping up with new sets as they come out and adding them into the cube. And then there was one special set that I had on that original screenshot of the cards that we were starting with. And then I have another 1 or 2 special editions of videos that we'll be able to do and add those into the cube also. So this link will go in to the video description. You can look up any information if you want it and know anything more about Guilds of Ravnica, or if you just want to watch us rip open packs and build some decks, then stay tuned. And now the fun part. We get to rip some packs. I'm just going to go over some of the better cards as we open them, some of the things that will be more key for decks, anything that's, a lot of commons like this, like the Cosmotronic Wave, I'm not going to touch on very much. Radical Idea is good in the Jumpstart decks. Rhizome Lurker I wanted to be good. Legionnaire is very good in aggressive decks. Darkblade Agent is very good in specifically Dimir Surveil decks. Peacemaker average. Whisper Agent, another key piece to the Surveil decks. We Dragonauts I love because I'm an Izzet player and love Kiln Fiend type abilities. And then our rare in this pack was an Erratic Cyclops, which doesn't really excite me, even though I just mentioned that I do love those type of cards. That might be something if we end up doing some kind of goofy version of the deck set, the cards we're going to play in the cube. Maybe we'll add that there. Unexplained Disappearance is good for the Surveil decks. Bounce spell that also triggers Surveil. Deadly Visit is premium unconditional removal that also surveils. Lava Coil is premium removal both in the limited environment and was really a really good removal spell in the standard environment as well because it exiles the card. Discovery Dispersal, good draw spell. And Pelt Collector, halfway decent rare. If we play any kind of green deck, a Pelt Collector would be perfectly reasonable. Before that was a City Watch Sphinx, which would be good in any deck that plays blue and is going to have flyers in it. Another radical idea, I mean, it's just a common, we're probably going to see a bunch of them. Luminous Bonds, this sets pacifism effect. Artful Takedown is one of the bomb uncommons, another copy of Lava Coil. So at the moment it kind of looks like maybe some sort of Grixis spells deck is the best that we have so far. Grixis being blue, black, and red. Ionize adds to that. Ionize would probably be a card that if we don't end up playing, I consider putting in a cube because it would be really good in any kind of Izzet-based control deck. Because it both counters a spell and does damage to your opponent. Siege Worm is one of the better commons for the Convoke deck. Notion Rain is a premium card for the Dimir deck. Draws cards and surveils what you're looking to do. Murmuring Mystic is really good. It creates a flying token every time you cast an instant or sorcery. Disinformation Campaign is kind of the biggest surveil payoff. Quasi-Duplicate is the rare. That's another card. If we do or don't play that, that'll probably end up in the cube at some point because that just seems like a kind of fun card that you want in any kind of cube environment. Savage Strand's another unconditional removal spell. It does make you sack a creature. Another copy of Artful Takedown to go in with the rest of the blue-black things that we've opened so far. Devious Cover-Up, a counterspell that exiles and also shuffles cards back into your own library in case you think you're going to mill. Another Sky Knight Legionnaire. Boros looks pretty good so far. Chemister's Insight is a premium draw spell. Draw 2 cards, pay 4, but you can do it twice. Another copy of Erratic Cyclops, so I don't know, I kind of guarantee at some point we're going to do some kind of goofy version of the cube with goofy build-arounds, and the 2 Erratic Cyclops will be first on that list if we do decide to go that route. Command the Storm is a good removal spell. Capture Spheres are alright. Crackling Drake is one of my favorite cards because, like I said, I love Izzet and casting spells. Sinister Sabotage is a counterspell. It also it also surveils. And then we opened our first Shockland, which is Temple Garden, the green-white one. So that will end up probably as fixing in the cube, along with, of course, the millions of gates that we're going to be opening throughout this. Deadweight, premium, cheap removal. Another copy of Chemist's Insight. Ladev Champion if we go the token route. Overgrown Tomb, so our second Shockland. This time we have green-black. Mausoleum Secret's the kind of card that it's a tutor, so that would probably end up in the cube at some point, potentially, for that purpose alone. Gateway Plaza fixes for all colors for whenever we decided to add greedy 5-color decks to the cube. Sprouting Renewal was okay. It can either make a creature or destroy an artifact or enchantment, so that seems like the kind of thing that might be a decent sideboard card in the cube. Dawn of Hope if we ever decide to do any sort of life gain theme within the cube. Healer's Hawk is something that'll go in any white aggressive deck. Electromancer for more spells. Another copy of Notion Rain. So I'm seeing a lot of good Dimir sort of decks, or Dimir cards. Blue-black. Speaking of, Night Veil Predator is probably the best threat that Dimir has because it's hexproof and flies, so your opponent can't target it, and most of the time can't block it since it has a little bit of evasiveness. Circuitous Rood will be probably played in the cube later as mana fixing, since we'll of course have a ton of gates after opening both guilds and Ravnica Allegiance. Thought Erasure, another Dimir card, lets you pick apart your opponent's hand. Second copy of Mausoleum Secrets. Another copy of Healer's Hawk. Another copy of Deadweight. Another Murmuring Mystic, so there's some kind of blue plus another color spells deck waiting to be built. Boros Challenger and Tajik, along with the 2 Sky Knight Legionnaires, kind of make me think that we might end up in a Boros deck. We've seen some decent green-white cards. The X Convoke creature, as well as the 5-main Rosemane Centaur, I believe it's called, the 5-mana Convoke card. So those would probably be played if we end up in some kind of green-white or green-white red deck. Nothing too exciting out of that pack. Blood Operative goes in the Surveil deck also. And then I believe that's it. Let's go back to deck building in a minute here. Alright, welcome back to the first episode of Packs to Cube. Here's the part where we actually get to have some fun and build some decks out of the packs that were opened over the course of the last few minutes. I have special guest here, Dom the Bearded Guy. He's the guy responsible for keeping me in line, because he's been playing this game way longer than I have, and is probably smarter than I am, and I admit that about very few people.
I'm on it.
So, looking at the cards that we have, we'll go through the rares. We got a bunch of crap. So far, like, the only one, like, I mean, Tajik is probably a build around if we have enough other Boros aggro type stuff to go with. Other than that, I mean, Quasi Duplicate will play because it's fun, and it is a pretty good card if you have something else that's good. Mausoleum Secrets is a good card specifically for a cube probably, but not in a regular limited deck, so we can choose whether or not we want to include that. The Blood Operative is good specifically in Surveil decks, so it's another one that would be good in a deck that we're building here, but probably wouldn't be good in the actual cube itself. What are your thoughts on some of the rares? Anything else that you think I missed? Or
Dawn of Hope is a bomb in the limited format, and sleeping on that I think would be a mistake. It's a 1-card win condition, and it keeps you alive. Tajik is just amazing. Yes, it probably needs to be in an aggressive deck, but I wouldn't call it a build around. It's just a A-tier card that beats down. So we'd be looking to include that in a deck as well. It's a little bit interesting that Dawn of Hope and Tajik pull in slightly different directions, because Tajik wants to smash and Dawn of Hope wants to drag the game out and create an advantage. But we'll find a way.
Sounds good. All right, so we'll start there. Are we going to put them both in the same deck probably, just because they're both white, at least to begin with? Can mess around with it from there.
Sure.
So then we'll move Quasi Duplicate. We'll put that in deck 2 for the time being. So when I look at the uncommons, the ones that really jump out to me are the ones that I both played the most and lost to the most, and that's probably Night Veil Predator being the one that I lost to the most, and Crackling Drake being the one that I played the most. I like Crawl Harpooner as an option as a reach blocker and something to trade with an opponent's flyer in the late game. Plus, it's good as a 3/2 in the early game. Fine Broker, return a permanent from the graveyard to your hand. That's always a good effect. Sort of like a better Gravedigger, but more cost-restrictive Gravedigger sort of card. The other things, Murmuring Mystic, but that's just because I like casting spells. Chemister's Insight is a good card. Played a lot in Standard while it was in. We Dragonauts and Crackling Drake are like We Dragonauts addition to Crackling Drake anyway is, as someone who likes tempo decks and casting spells, those are the two things that strike out to me right away. And then Lava Coil being premium removal, we got 2 of those. Goblin Crater Maker, I think, is one of the cards that would be like versatile in a cube, because it can destroy a creature for 2 and also destroy maybe mana fixing, or if we get into sets with Eldrazi, it can actually destroy an Eldrazi. And then the Flight of the Equinauts, flying Convoke, so it can be cheaper. What was your thoughts about the uncommons here?
Well, first let me say that the viewers need to understand that Kaz has a huge Izzet bias, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he's always going to want to build the Izzet deck because he likes tempo and spells. I agree that with the cards that you highlighted and some of the things you talked about, but one of the big things that I think you missed here is that, and we haven't looked at the commons yet, though I can see them off in the corner of the screen, this uncommon pool is begging you to build a Dimir deck. In addition to the rare Blood Operative, which is a repeatable card advantage engine, basically, because you can keep bringing it back whenever you surveil, which is something you want. You have the Night Veil Predator, which is just amazing and impossible to remove. You have Disinformation Campaign, which during the limited format was probably the most busted of the build-around uncommons. You also have the Thought Erasure right below it, which takes more cards away from your opponent and surveils. It's everything your deck wants to do. We may not have it. Oh, and there's a Whispering Snitch. The Whispering Snitch, which triggers every time you surveil and drain, so you don't even have to attack to finish the game off. Add into that the guy that makes the birds when you cast spells in a deck that's going to have a lot of non-creature spells. That deck seems very strong, and it has a lot of the best build-arounds from the format.
Okay, so we can start there. We can start moving. Let's see. So we had the Mystic, Disinformation Campaign, Night Veil Predator, Thought Erasure. I can't believe I missed the Thought Erasure. That's a little. I don't know. I wish I would. That's a little me feeling stupid right now. But oh well. That's what we're here for, to catch those moments. So is there anything that we want to add to the red-white? The red-white probably gets the lava coils.
Right. If we have an aggressive red-white deck, we want all the 2-drops we can get. And the Boros Legion, I believe it is, the gold 2-drop towards the bottom of the list is quite good. As well as the Guild Mage, you're going to play that as a way to finish the opponent off. Because you're mentoring, sometimes you will play 1-drops in that deck. So while I normally gloss right over those, we may want to take a look at those.
Yeah, I tossed in the War Marshal or the Hasda Marshal, creative soldier with lifelink, and whenever that and 2 creatures attack. So,
yeah, we used to call that battalion, but
yeah,
now we just.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, wait a second, that was something, but it didn't come to me right away. Would the Ladev Champion go in that deck too?
We probably need to look at the pool and consider the goal, right? Because if we're going to be aggressive, we don't want to be 3-color. But if we're going to try and be powerful and leverage our most powerful cards, which would include that Dawn of Hope and also the Ladev Champion, there's an option there. So we have to kind of pick a lane if we're going to be Boros or Naya, which is to say red-white or red-white-green.
Okay, so I'll toss them in there for the time being. We can always cut. We'll put that in there. Do you think this deck would end up being straight to mirror? Or do you think that we'll probably want to do a Grixis deck?
Either is possible, but just scanning, my gut instinct would be to try to build a Dimir first, especially when you have the, I'll call it XXYY casting cost uncommons, which you really want to be able to cast during the game. Having a 3rd color is just, you're adding 2 or 3 mana to that card, so.
Okay. So I'm just going to finish adding some of the other things that we talked about. So it looks like
definitely grab that Blood Operative out of the rare pile.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I think I just have to get used to the fact that when we're building these decks, that there's going to be stuff that gets left out. Because we're building a pool of 12 packs rather than 6 when we would build a normal sealed deck. And, that's something that I'm going to have to, convince myself sometimes that, we kind of have to stay away from doing things like that.
Right. The question is, if you want to build the best possible deck, then yes, you're gonna leave great cards out. It's a little bit like building a 2-headed giant sealed pool. You shouldn't be playing everything that you play in a normal sealed deck. So this should be powered up a little. They should be representative, block constructed light decks, I would think.
Yeah, definitely.
We also, if you're ready to look at the commons, we have a whole suite of the Great Dimir Gold Commons. Basically, just a powerful tour of everything Dimir does.
Yeah,
Arc Takedown is a 2-for-1. Notion Rain is a 2-for-1 that triggers your surveils. Darkblade Agent is exactly what you want to be doing in Dimir.
Yep. Whisper Agent was a card that I liked a lot too. It allows you to keep instants open, and then if don't cast any of those, then you get to flash in a 3/2 and surveil.
Right, and the ability to trigger all your surveillance at instant speed is probably the best part of that card.
Yeah. So let's get those over. Okay. Notion Ring. Artful Takedowns. Darkblade. Okay. So the only thing that we're really missing by not playing green is like a Siege Worm. Generous Stray was playable, but just because it draws a card, not because it's any good. I don't even really see anything else that pushes me towards that color.
No, I mean the most compelling thing about green is the two uncommons that are two of the premier mana fixers, the Circuitous Route and the District Guide. But that kind of leads you down a multicolor deck, which, if you wind up going Naya with deck one, you still could go that way and build it less aggressive, but then you'll be looking to splash other things too.
Right.
Depends. So the Dimir deck definitely wants to play those dead weights. I mean, that's premier removal, and it keeps you alive against the real aggressive Boros decks.
Yep. We have one Deadly Visit. We'd probably play that.
Probably. I'd be willing to cut it only because, again, we have such a huge pool, but my instinct would be that it's in.
Yeah. I don't see any of the Price of Fame, so I think having one Deadly Visit as the unconditional removal is probably good. I like Rats more than most, but I know you're not going to let me play Burglar Rats. Child of Night is like a filler card.
Well, Hired Poisoner is in, and
yep.
At the time, Dowser of Lights would at least one would definitely make it. That card was deceptively good at shoring up the ground, finishing the game, doing everything that Dimir needed a little help in. Again, that's one of those that might wind up on the sideline because of the size of the pool, but we'll see.
Okay, we'll toss it in for now. Vapors is just a sideboard card. Severed Strand isn't good enough. Would you play the Centipedes?
My instinct would be not to. We certainly could play a number of them. They would be an option, but I wouldn't be trying to get them in the deck.
Okay.
I'd rather play a Wishcoin Crab. I mean, what we want to do here is hold the ground, win in the air, generate card advantage, and drain the opponent with surveils. So, the Centipede doesn't really do any of it.
Right. Makes sense to me.
I will say that I just saw, as you were scrolling through, a Passwall Adept, and that's another card that the Dimir deck's going to want to be able to finish games.
Okay.
It also serves as an early blocker.
Sounds good. Unexplained Disappearance, maybe.
Definitely.
I
mean, we have all these things that trigger on Surveil, and we want to be able to do it with effective cards, and it's pretty easy to get your card back out of that without a trigger too. So
okay. I'm going to move the Radical Ideas over. No, we're not going to play all three. We'll probably keep one, I would guess. But even that is dicey since we have the two Notion Rains already that are better.
Yeah, Dimir Informant is probably in. That was a critical card. Devious Cover-Up, that was a kind of card that you wanted in the deck. Watcher of the Mist was a kind of card you wanted in the deck. Man, all the Dimir cards in this pool are just amazing.
Yeah. Any number of Muse Drakes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd slide them over. This deck is going to have far too many cards in it.
Yeah. The mirror deck probably doesn't care about capture spheres, right? That's a little higher cost for its
Well, it
effect.
fills that same role as being able to play on either turn and hold up your mana and do something else. So the more of those type of cards you have, the more you want, right? So if you're going to play the counters and the flash creatures, then having access to capture sphere is even better.
Okay. All right, we'll toss those in. So we'll skip over the green since we already touched on those a little bit and didn't have anything too super exciting that is going to force us into green. So we can go back to the red for the red-white deck. What's your feeling on direct current?
Oh, it's in.
Okay.
Direct current is huge. It can go to the head for 4, which basically makes it like a fire blast over 2 turns. It can clear the way for your little beaters. It does what you want.
Okay.
The deck may Barging Sergeant. That's like I would play 1 maybe. I would be happier if I didn't.
Yeah.
Blade Instructor. That you're going to want that. Anything with mentors that costs 3 or less is going to be premium.
Yeah. The Hawks are in.
Definitely. The Healer's Hawk, that is a card worth talking about for 30 seconds. It's such an innocuous little card, but it's so important to everything that the Boros beatdown decks are trying to do. There was a time where 1-mana 1/1 flyers in limited Magic were a trap. Healer's Hawk is not that in this format. It's the truth.
Yeah, so those are definitely in. Would we play a Loxodon Restorer? Maybe think about 1.
Yeah, again, that in or out is fine.
Yeah.
It's not like you're excited about it.
Yeah.
That's another 1-drop that I wouldn't mind having since it does come with 2 bodies.
10th District Guard is just a bear. Probably play 1 Take Heart, right? As a combat trick.
Yeah, I mean you want the cheaper combat tricks, and so far I've seen that in a.
There's a Sure Strike.
Yeah, the Sure Strike is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, probably
want a Cosmotronic Wave in the deck too, because you just want a Falter in this deck.
Sure. Luminous Bonds, probably would play 1 of those.
Oh yeah, that's your unconditional removal card. It gets something on the way. Sky Knight Legionnaire, if you haven't hit that one yet, that's the gold card. That's definitely doing what you want.
Yeah, we got 2 of those, and when I saw that, I was like, all right, Boros is the thing. The Fresh Race Recruits we'd probably play.
Yeah, I mean, you have a wealth of 2-drops. You can just jam them all in and trim it later, but you have those. You have the Celestia hybrid card right above it, Vernati Shieldmate, which you basically get to play as a white 2-drop that has Vigilance, which if it's collecting counters matters. Hammer Dropper, I mean, you play 1 of those.
Yeah.
Definitely better than that Convoke Loxodon if we're looking at cuts already.
Will we play a Command the Storm?
Maybe 1, definitely not 2.
Okay.
I'd rather not, given the power level that I feel like the deck's going to be at, but we'll see.
These are just vanilla 3/2s. I'm just going to put them in just in case. I highly doubt that they're going to make it because I feel like we're already at like 15 to 20 creatures in that deck that are better than it.
That's fine. I mean, you'll probably just wind up moving them back out, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Ornery Goblin is probably better than some of the 2-drops that are in there, but
Yeah.
just because it takes down 3 toughness blockers.
And then I'll move the Sure Strikes just in case. I think our 1-drops are better than Torch Courier, so we probably don't need that.
I'd agree.
Alright, so it doesn't look like we have anything that we missed until we'll just have to, because we took more than we needed, and we'll just end up cutting a bunch of stuff now.
Right. And so the question is, are we attached to this Boros deck, or do we want to splash green? And, to me, the answer is the Boros aggro deck is going to be much more lean and mean than splashing green is going to add power. I mean, you're going to get a Pelt Collector, and which is a rare, and it's a nice one. And you're going to get the Celestia uncommon, that Ledev champion, which is a powerful card, but I think there's enough power and synergy in this deck that you don't need it.
Totally agree. That one. Back to the uncommons. Alright. So now, let's go and sort by mana cost on the deck. Yeah, so we got a lot of cuts to make. We have 38 and 37 right now in the decks.
That's not surprising to me. There's far too much. Yeah, this could make a deck as a 23rd card stuff in there when we're dealing with a pool that's twice the size of a sealed pool.
Yeah,
but that's.
So I guess we'll just go through 1 mana cost at a time and see what we want to take out. So we'll start with the Boros deck. We have 5 1-drops. Between the Hasda Marshal, the Healer's Hawk, and the Hunted Witnesses. Do we really need 5?
I mean, that's a fair question, but I would recommend, especially in the aggro deck, that you start at the other end of the curve.
Okay.
Because you'd rather overload on cheap cards and play 16 land than play too many expensive cards.
Fair enough. Sounds good. So the Fly of the Equinaughts, what do you think about that in this deck?
It's fine. I'm not impressed. I mean, I would rather attack with my creatures than tap them to make 1 creature.
That was kind of what I was thinking, and the reason why I think we probably need to just cut it.
Yep. I would also cut the Restorer. We're heavy on cards, and he's not that impressive.
Yep, same argument.
Cut the first Command the Storm. Or rather, the second it should be.
Yeah. See how I do that. Alright.
That's alright, we'll take it out.
Yeah, we'll fix it later. Alright, so we got 1 Command the Storm. Barging Sergeant. Probably keepable.
Yeah, I like having a haste threat.
One of the waves probably get rid of.
Oh yeah, I only want 1 of those, ever.
Okay.
Because when it's bad, it does nothing, but when it's good, it wins you the game. You can't have too many cards like that.
Yeah. Hammer Dropper probably stays, since it's the only 4-drop we have.
Definitely. I mean, if the aggressive deck's curve can stop at 4, that's the dream.
Yeah. So then we'll move on to the 3s. Legionnaire is uncuttable.
Mm-hmm.
Luminous Bonds is uncuttable. Halberdiers are easily cuttable.
Yeah.
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the common pile with you. Direct Currents, do we want 2 or 1?
We have no other cheap removal. You have a couple combat tricks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would lean towards keeping 2.
Okay. Blade Instructor?
I'm in for that. I mean, you want the Mentor is key, right? You want to overload on cheap creatures to catch the Mentor, and then you have to have the Mentors. And right now, you have the Blade Instructors, the Tajik, the 2-drop Mentor, and then the 4-drop Mentor, right?
Yeah, so back to the Direct Currents, I just noticed that we have 2 Lava Coils.
Okay, you can.
Do we want to cut 1 or both of the Direct Currents then?
1.
Okay.
Lava Coil can't go to the face. It's a big difference.
True. Okay,
This
so
deck will go upstairs.
yeah. So now on to the 2-drops. Shieldmate. It's probably better than. No, Ornery Goblin's good. We probably don't want the Dawn of Hope in an aggressive deck, right?
Well, the Dawn of Hope is a 1-card win condition, right? So it's like your 1/5-drop in an expensive deck, but then again, it's going to be one of those cards that when you draw it, some number of the time it's going to do nothing because you're just smashing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a fundamental question for the deck. I would be okay playing it. I would be okay cutting it. If you really want to focus on being the best aggro you can be, you should probably cut it.
Okay. That's kind of what I think this deck is, right? Like, everything else about it is beat face and do it quickly, right?
Correct.
So, this one will move into the maybe board, as in, like, maybe later we find some place that we want to put it. Once we get into other adding other things that weren't in the original decks into the cube in general.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at 29. We're still on the 2 Sure Strike. Do we want 2 or 1?
They're both in right now. I'd go down to 1.
Okay. Ornery Goblin, we keep. Guild Mage, we keep, even though it's mostly just a. Well, I guess tapping something is really good.
So going with the damage mode, I mean, you do need a way to just deal the last few points of damage, and you have that. You have direct current. You have the removal spells. So that's what that's all about.
So the next thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to move Crater Maker to the maybe later at some point in the cube pile, because it doesn't fit this deck, even though I really like it. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's better than a 2-drop that doesn't work as a shock.
That's true.
And you have like 6 of those.
Fair.
Like, I would cut one of the shield mates or one of the 2-1s before I ever cut that.
Okay. So I guess
got a lot of those.
It's kind of what do we think is better between the fresh face recruits and the shield mates, because I think we do probably need to get rid of like 2 2-drops, and those are the 2 that I think would be on the chopping block if we're not going to get rid of the Crater Maker.
Well, I would probably get rid of Ornery Goblin before I got rid of either of them.
Okay.
My reasoning being that the Fresh Face Recruit is a colorless card in this deck. That's extremely powerful when you're going to be cheating on lands. All of the 1-drops are white, which means you're going to be heavier white, which means that the McKindy Shield Mate is going to basically be more castable. And so for mana concerns, I would cut the Ornery Goblin.
Okay. So at 27, we'll say this would be a 16-land deck if we were going to build it for real, right? Yeah, so we have 3 cuts left then on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Do we care about the Take Heart?
Well, at this point, I would rather have a couple tricks and probably 1 less 1-drop, because that's a lot of 1-drops. The Healer's Hawk, you'll play as many as you get.
Yep.
I would probably start by cutting Has the Marshal, because it's not going to trigger that often. I like Hunting Witness better because you'll get your 2 creatures out of it. So I'd start by cutting the Marshal personally.
Okay.
Because, having a creature that represents another creature when it dies allows you to make more suicidal attacks with your mentors, push through damage, and still have another attack on board next.
Sounds good. So then 2 left.
Well, I'd go back to the top of the curve and trim again. Probably take out the other Command the Storm.
Okay.
And at this point, probably take out the Barging Sergeant too, and just get down to a 4-drops and less deck.
Sounds good. I did not expect the first deck that we built to be a total beat face deck because that's usually not how either of us play. But
It's where the cards want to get.
that's what we have.
It's also a huge theme of the set, right?
Yep.
Smash. So.
Yeah. Yep. All right, cool. So I'm comfortable. We'll name this the Boros Beat Faces. Okay. Must have a limit on characters because I can't say faces. So
it'll make for some interesting naming conventions. You say the name you want it to be, you start typing, and when the field is full, that's it.
Yep, exactly. All right, so on to the Dimir deck. Where do you want to start here, top or bottom?
What's that?
You want to start at the top or bottom on the Dimir deck?
Well, to me, the Dimir deck is going to be about efficient removal, staying alive, and triggering things. So that's what we have to focus on. Anything that doesn't do one of those three things is probably out. So the 1-drops are all in. They keep us alive. They're efficient removal. So is the Pass Wall Adept. 3 Radical Ideas is too much. You can go down to 1 right now or just cut them all. Because they draw cards but don't surveil, and that's really harsh.
Okay, we'll go down to 1 for now because we do have 2 Murmuring Mystics. If we do decide to cut 1 or both of those, then we'll probably cut the last Radical Idea too. Unexplained Disappearance goes in with your staying alive, so and triggering things. It does both, so obvious keep. Snitch is in. Operative stays. Darkblade stays. Informant stays. Do we want 1 or both Notion Rains?
At least 1. It's a very good card, but I can trim 1. I mean, we have a lot of cards to go.
Quasi-Duplicate probably isn't that good in this deck, I would think.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything we want. So again, we're cutting a powerful card because it doesn't fit with the theme of our deck, and that's the takeaway from this video, I think.
Yeah, so we'll move this over into the maybe later board.
Yeah, something I'd love to see in the cube.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. We're at Sinister Sabotages and Whisper Agents, those both stay.
At this point, I'm with you on taking out the Capture Spheres because we have the Artful Takedowns.
Okay.
Again, another good card, but we're a little flooded on cards.
Yeah. I'm not even going to move that to the maybe board because there's a million versions of that card. I'm sure we'll end up accidentally getting a couple of those in at some point.
Right. Also worth noting that those don't trigger the Murmuring Mystic, which is why we would want to cut those before another removal spell.
So what about the Muse Drakes?
Again, a card that always made the deck in the past, but I can easily see it going now. We're still very heavy on cards, and it doesn't do what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that was the next one that looked like we'd probably get rid of to me. So we're at 29. We have 6 cuts to go.
Mm-hmm.
1 Dowser, I would definitely want to cut. Do we want to cut both?
Start with 1.
Start with 1, okay. Sphinx and the Watcher, I don't want to touch either of those. Deadly Visit, Predator, no.
Yeah, all that's untouchable. So how many instants and sorceries do you have for the Murmuring Mystic right now?
We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, and 10 is where, I mean, not that it's a hard rule, the card's just fine, but 10 is like where I want to be, and so I would say we don't want to cut no more than 1 instant or sorcery if we want to stay with the Mystics, and I think we do.
What about the Devious Cover-Up?
Having a hard counter in this format was so big. Now, if you're trying to build this deck with the knowledge that you already built a 3-drops go fast deck, then yeah, you'd cut the Devious Cover-Up. But in the dark, you would definitely play that.
Okay.
So it's really a question of how you want to do it. I would cut a Chemister's Insight first. I mean, this deck can already draw 1,000,000 cards.
True.
Then I guess you are going to cut 1 Dowser because you want to stay alive. and it doesn't fly, and all the other ones do.
Well, I already cut one, so we're going to cut both now then?
Right. I mean, we still have cuts to go. We can't take out a spell, so here we are.
All right.
It also doesn't surveil, so
Yeah.
this Dimir deck is very representative of a good Dimir deck from like draft.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess at this point I would cut one of the 4 1-drops. I don't know which one. Probably a Hired Poisoner. I like Deadweight a little better. Harder to interact with.
Sure. I mean, what about the Pass the Wall Adept? I think we have enough flyers in here that we probably don't need to use its ability as an unblock to make something unblockable.
That's fair. That's fair. Again, in the format, it was huge, but to have one. But the deck is more powerful than that.
Yeah. So we're down to one last cut.
Yeah, you can make the case that you actually don't need to go to 17 land in this deck, even though it's a little more expensive because you're surveilling and drawing and you have a lot of cheap answers. Plus the disinformation campaign.
Okay.
If you had another cut, I'd be okay with it. It has to be a permanent or a non-instant or sorcery, I should say, and it can't be a build around.
So, of those things, like, Poisoner probably is the only thing that would be on the chopping block, because everything else really fits the plan. Informant, I guess, would be the other one that could be on the chopping block.
Yeah, I would never cut one Informant from this deck. It's going to do a lot more. I would cut the Agent, the flash card, before I cut the Informant.
All right. Well, let's just take the coward's way out and say 24.
Okay. 16 land it is. I mean, really, it's going to surveil and draw enough cards that it's not going to be a problem.
All right. I'll let you.
This deck is worth noting, would always choose to draw first because it has cheap interaction and ways to stay alive, and it just wants more cards.
Okay, so that's what we're going to name it. Dimir draw first. Or draw first, since we're one character short. All right, so that's what we have. We have a Dimir deck that looks pretty brutal. I feel like I've lost to this exact deck 5,000 times on Arena because anybody that played Arena during this set only drafted Dimir, and that's all you played against ever.
Yeah, I think I drafted it 4,000 of those 5,000 times.
Yeah, I could see that. And then we have our Boros Beat Face deck, which is something that I never got to work on Arena, but I would actually play this and do what it says on the box, beat some face.
I think that these two decks would actually function pretty interestingly as dual decks, except the games are going to be decided really fast. Either the Boros player is going to crush the Dimir deck, or the Dimir deck's going to answer what the Boros deck does. It's going to go another 20 turns, but the Boros deck's going to be dead in the water.
Yep.
So
the Boros deck either wins or concedes after turn 5, probably.
Yeah, basically.
All right, so that's what we have for decks. We'll close this up here. Look forward to the next episode. Thank you all for watching.
Thanks.
I'm doing that thing again where I think that I'm on OBS, but